in the coming weeks. And when you look at us just coming from an election, this is not where we expect it to be. No.
Most certainly, I mean, this is not where we expect it to be. And if you asked me the state of the nation, I would say that it is quite precarious and fairly uncertain. All of us are seated at the edge. We are not sure what is going to happen next, whether you look at it politically, in terms of the politics, but also in terms of the economy, and of course in terms of our social cohesion. And this is largely because of our contested elections. I wanted to say that this election was contested, but I realized that since the multi-party democracy, we ushered in multi-party democracy in 1992, our elections have always been contested. And there's a positive element to that, that the fact that, you know, democracy is never quiet or silent. Democracy is sometimes loud and messy, and that is how we strengthen it. So if we look at it from that perspective, then there is some good element to it, that our democracy is growing stronger, you know. But there's also the downside to what we are witnessing now. And what we've witnessed after every election since we ushered in multi-party democracy, apart from 2002, that we find ourselves in a continuous and constant electioneering mood. And there's a danger to that, because if you are constantly in an electioneering mood, it means that everyone is focused on elections, the past elections, but also the next or the coming elections. And so nothing can be done. We are thinking short term all the time. And we can look back at 2002. We had a referendum in between. We can look back to 2007. There was contestation. We can look back to 2013. There was contestation. We ended up with, I think a handshake in 2017. So it means that everyone is always focusing on how do we consolidate political power for now and for the next elections. And more important issues will be forgotten in that kind of a scenario. And so we find ourselves back to where we were, back to where we've always been after every election, setting the country in an electioneering mood. And the danger with that is we will forget important things that are essential, especially for the common mwananchi, what we would always call the kitchen table issues, you know, issues of how do we make food affordable? How do we make housing affordable? How do we make education accessible and affordable for all? So there's a danger to that. And also, you never know how far politicians can go. And what is happening now is a clear indication of how politicians can go to extremes, you know. And if you look at both sides, with the leader of Azimio, Raila Odinga, saying that he does not recognize the current government, and so it's not illegitimate. And that means, you know, dismissing the current government. And with the government running its programs as if the supposedly leader of opposition is not there, means that politicians can take quite extremes, which can put the country at the edge of the cliff, and that is dangerous.
You know, when I also look, I mean, just a bird's eye view. Kenya will be 60. Kenya is 60 this year. 60 years, right?
That should be mature.
You know, right? 60 years. And as you say, 60 years later, we're still thinking about food on the table. And without rain, I mean, we get in a situation. Almost immediately, we get into a hunger situation. We are still talking about healthcare. We're still talking about education. And I mean, it's 60 years down the line, right? And the question is, when do we get it wrong? I know that elections are part of it. But there seems to be a systemic condition that that has not delivered us. And we don't have a 60-year evidence, to show that, we've been here 60 years.
Yeah.
And don't say we are a young nation.
I think 60 is mature enough. I mean, first, I'm careful not to say that we are a young nation.
Yeah, let's not say that. Just like we should not say it's the colonialists. I mean, it reaches a point when we just have to...
We need to grow up.
Just grow up, Yeah.
Yeah, I think partly is we haven't got the fundamentals right. Since the post-colonial time, we didn't get the fundamentals right. I think every leader that gets an opportunity forgets about the vision and the long-term plan and starts thinking about, self-preservation, self-interest, and short-term gains. And that way, no one wants to set the real beacons that can help us make progress beyond now in another so many years, so that everyone gets in there and thinks of what is in it for me for now. How can I entice and excite the populace for a moment? I think the only time we tried to set the fundamentals and the pillars was perhaps in 2002, but that was also short-lived because the leaders then realized, setting these beacons, we might get distracted in the process and other people might acquire the power. And so let's think about power first. Yeah. These other fundamentals can wait. So I blame it on perhaps lack of visionary leadership for me. Until we get leaders who think beyond themselves and think beyond now and think about posterity. Because we must get back to setting those fundamentals. Yeah. They haven't been set. We keep trying and then lose track and get back to what is the default mode, which is really just the short-term interest and not the long-term vision. So even though we are 60, you realize we behave like toddlers. We are a country.
And rightly so, because there are countries that we've always, the Asian tigers. A number of them, we are age mates. True. In terms of like independence and freedom. But somehow they have joined, nearly the first world. And here we are, 60 years later, and I'm wondering, and you can wonder with me, I mean, what would make us different 60 years from now? Like what would make us different? Because if 60 years on, we are here, we are still power-centered as compared to people-centered.
True.
I mean, what would prevent us from 60 years from now being in the same position?
I mean, just doing what our peers have done. I mean, you mentioned Asian tigers, and you just need to go to Korea or Singapore and see how those guys have, those countries have leapfrogged. South Korea was borrowing from us in the 60s. Their GDP now, they are amongst the top countries when it comes to economic development and progress. And what they got right are the fundamentals. Focus on people, not power. Put in structures for posterity, not just for now. Build a country for people, not for a few, for everyone, not for a few people. Reinvest in the country. Don't take away from the country. Put in infrastructure and the structures required so that everyone who comes in continues to build on what you've set. And don't let politics take precedent, because I think that has been our failure, that everyone thinks about political power. No one thinks about, beyond that, no one thinks about anything. And leadership has stopped being about service now. It's everyone is going in there just to accumulate and collect the much they can, and which is quite unfortunate. So no one thinks about service. In fact, when you think about service, you're considered an exception, and chances are you'll also be quite isolated, and you'll be quite lonely.
Isn't that unfortunate?
Quite unfortunate.
That the moment you do the right thing, you become unpopular.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And it's such a reversed state of things, because that's some of the things that you're mentioning, Rafael, are about values. Values that the leadership must uphold. You know, a certain level of accountability, that if you don't meet a certain threshold as a politician, then you resign.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
Either voluntarily or out of just policy, that there are particular lines as a leader, value lines that you don't cross.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, just speak about that.
I mean, yeah, it's true, and I think we lack values as a country, and I think that conversation we need a reflection on how to build certain ethos, certain values as a country. It's really not about, I see politicians and every government now thinks about building new roads, connecting people to the grid in terms of electricity, and all those are very, very important things. But a country that lacks values, those things can be brought down and can collapse within a minute. And so that is where we need to go back and start having that conversation about values. I am happy that we attempted to do that with our current constitution, the 2010 constitution, by at least thinking of integrating and inserting chapter 6 in that constitution. But if there is a chapter that has never, not really never, but has been ignored, largely because it touches on politicians, it is that chapter 6. Yet, if we were to implement chapter 6 and ensure that we have leaders of integrity, leaders who are responsive to the needs and concerns of the people, leaders who are accountable, then resources that we have within our borders truly are sufficient for all of us, for now and the future. But because we ignore that bit, we end up with situations that we find ourselves in where a few people accumulate so much. People are constantly fighting to have access to power because they know if you have power, then you can do anything. You can accumulate the much that you need. But if chapter 6 was operationalized, then chances are we would have leaders of integrity and leaders who think about service and not just about their personal interest. And when I'm talking about leaders, that would also be true about citizens, because we are as guilty just as the leaders that are in power, because we also mobilize around these known values or lack of values, and push some of these leaders whom sometimes we know they lack integrity or are not able to provide service to the people. So we are we share the blame.
You know, I'm just thinking, mass action usually is, every time we think mass action, we think, ooh, I mean, something bad is about to happen.
Yeah.
But you're talking about the chapter 6 of the Constitution that is yet to see, you know, active operation. And just wondering whether that would not be like a really rich place for mass action, you know, whereby we're not crying about power. It's not who is going to be placed in power, but somebody who has flopped in their values, you know. We can say that that person, you know, needs to come down. You know?
I mean,
so there's a particular space there which can actually make a real reform. And in a small little way, we've seen that in history, like during Mishuki's time, where there was a dignity around, just dignity. They talk about dignity, about how people are, you know, are in public transport. And that dignity became a mass action, you know, and it ended up being law. And so there is a space for a different kind of mass action, not just about power, but about the value system.
I totally agree with you. In fact, I think I was having a conversation with one of the former Chief Justices, and I remember it's a conversation that was rotating around having a Chapter 6 movement. You know, we need a Chapter 6 movement in this country. People who are saying, look, forget about everything else. Let us deal with this issue of values and integrity.
Yeah.
And I am happy that you are even, I mean, your thoughts are in, along the same lines, which I identify and share, that we need mass action around operationalization of Chapter 6, because therein lies hope for the future. Because without implementing, and like I say, without operationalizing Chapter 6, all these other things are good, but they are not sustainable. It is Chapter 6 on issues of values and integrity that would help us build a stronger foundation as a country. As it is now, no one cares about anything else that is happening. So we need to go back and ask ourselves, how do we operationalize this Chapter 6? And it's not an interesting conversation, especially for politicians, especially for leaders, because this is where you're putting them in the dock. So it's not something that will come easy. It is something that Wananchi needs to organize themselves, mobilize themselves, and push for it. And certainly, if there is anything that politicians would agree on, is working against Chapter 6. Because they know if we were to work on Chapter 6, it means that people will be more conscientized, leaders will be more responsive, responsible, and accountable. And chances are most of them will be locked out. And power won't be lucrative. You see, as it is now, power is so lucrative in this country. It is because power gives you access to many things. But with Chapter 6, it means that you'll only access that which is meant for you. But without Chapter 6, it means that you can go in poor, come in poor as a leader, live rich as a leader. But with Chapter 6, that will never happen. So what will drive you to run for office, for example? It will be that truly I want to serve the people. What would make you not resign if you feel that you are underperforming? It's because you feel like you have more access, even while in there. So operationalization of Chapter 6 would help us truly transform this country in ways that we would even overtake the Asian tigers like South Korea and Singapore.
Yeah, because it's an interesting thing about how you imagine that the current crop of leadership would actually fight the Chapter 6 movement.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they would really fight it, which really tells us there's an inroad there. There's an inroad right there.
Yes.
I know we bank a lot of our hopes on elections, and experience has we just need to, we have enough experience to tell us that, I mean, elections don't deliver as much. They under-deliver almost all the time.
True.
So much energy goes to them, but there's a certain under-delivery.
Yeah.
But this movement that would scare, the current crop of leaders, isn't there where the opportunity lies? Then?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. And I'm a believer in democratic processes, election being one of them, which is extremely important. But I am also not naive to imagine that elections can transform this country, because our elections, as is the case with many other elections in this part of the world, has become about money. So if you are running and you have good ideas and I have monies, and perhaps I don't have good ideas and I lack values and integrity, chances are I will beat you, because it's become about the tokens that you give to people. Our elections have become about people fighting hard to get in, knowing that all the energy they need to utilize is just to get in. But when it comes to real work, nothing happens. So while we must continue investing in elections, we must not be perpetually optimistic that elections can transform this country. What can transform this country is what we are talking about, you know, having a system that is going to sort of unleash values in our country. That's not elections. Elections will only give us leaders.
You know, you're saying something very revolutionary.
I wanted to use that term, then I realized.
In your soft-spoken
Exactly.
Voice, you're saying something very revolutionary.
Yes.
From your observation, elections we cannot bank on elections.
No, we cannot.
Let's have them, but we cannot bank on them,
them
to transform this country.
Yes.
I mean, I'm just asking myself now, what do we bank on? And we already have this, the possibility of a values movement that really can change a lot of things. I know this is something that many people may not want to engage, but we have to face it.
Yes.
That it is a contradiction in terms to say that we are lacking values, whereas we have a government that has declared on different fronts to be Christian and religious. How do you balance that? That we have a shortage of values, but we are a Christian, spiritual, religious government. What's going on there?
I think what's going on is that, first of all, politicians can do anything to win the masses and the votes. So that is one. But generally also, the second issue is that generally we are human, and human beings are folly and can put up a show for anything. Politics is about power, so and it's quite strong. It's about acquisition of power, and it's also about utilization of that power. And if you've ever heard the saying that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, it means that once you have access to that power, then you might even forget some of your beliefs, your faith, and what you believe in. So while we claim to be a Christian nation, and the government largely now, and I remember President Ruto himself saying that he's happy now that the church has been brought to the center of our politics. Well, that sounds like something good. It can also be something fairly dangerous because politics, and there's this discussion about, we always warned that we shouldn't mix the church and politics. There's a powerful truth to that, because when religion is used merely for political purposes, religion loses its eternal and real meaning, and becomes a follower of politics, and just another cynical method of acquisition of power. It becomes a vehicle for acquisition of power, because politics is about acquisition of power, and it changes depending on interest, depending on players and moments. Religion is not supposed to be like that. What you believed in yesterday should be what you believe in tomorrow. Politics is not like that. There are many interests that have to be considered. So therein, we need to be very careful how we merge and mix church and politics, because a politician can be good today, can be something else tomorrow. We do not expect that with a pastor. A pastor has to be consistent. We say walking on the straight and a narrow path. A politician can walk with you some distance on a straight and a narrow path, but is not likely to walk with you the entire journey. So that is why, while we claim to be a Christian nation, and governments and leaders in the past and now profess a certain faith, we cannot bank on them. That's why the church has to remain autonomous and independent from the state, because chances are the state, which is largely a formation put together by politicians, can become something else, because they want to maintain and consolidate this power.
Yeah, because, I mean, you would expect that when we stand and say that we are a God-fearing leadership, then there should be a way of translating that faith into some political accent. And when you look at it, it should translate in the form of justice. You know, it should, transform in terms of, I mean, a philosophy of love, in terms of people-centeredness. Totally, because there must be a translation. We cannot. The hallelujah is good, but maybe it doesn't fit very well in public. It needs to be translated into a political language. Now, I'm very interested, and our viewers too, in hearing how this values movement would look like. We'll take a short break, because that's something right there. Viewer, we are talking about the state of the nation, talking to Rafael Obonyo, who is a public policy specialist, and lots of interesting things, trying to be solutionist in terms of what's going on in our nation right now. Again, do engage us on 0708 222 2323. That's our WhatsApp line. Do engage us. Let's hear what you have to say about the state of the nation. We're taking a short break. We'll be right back again in this very insightful conversation.
Hope TV is where you look and live, with an excellent selection of the best Christian programming consisting of local and international content, of inspirational stories, talk shows, Bible commentary, youth, health shows, children entertainment, contemporary gospel music, extended times of worship, live broadcast, news, movies, drama, Christian ministry programs, and so much more. Hope TV is another quality service from Christ is the Answer Ministries, with over 45% of authentic and credible local content every week. Hope TV is a sister station to Hope FM, Kenya's leading Christian radio station, with footprints across the country. Tune in to Hope TV, where you look and live.
It's forever enough, always enough.
Anything goes from singing, dance to gymnastics to mind-blowing art. All you need is a skill and a star quality.
I'm 5 levels in the masqueta.
Make sure it is very straight and clean.
Just remember to join us every Saturday with me, your host, Tamika Arnett.
Only God can turn a mess into a message.
I have a boy on a wheelchair. Yeah. I'm still preaching on the pulpit.
Amen. Niliona mguu ya nyuma inakuja tu kunikanyaga, imenilenga tu kwa tumbo. Nikaitana tu Jesus.
I got tired of working with the x-ray papers, and one day I just woke up and decided to burn them.
A test into a testimony.
The whole community didn't want to hear that anybody is born again. Excommunicated, straight.
Bila Yesu hakuna njia.
Join Sharon Naitore Wangenye on Testify.
Katika hiyo harakati hiyo spirit ikakemewa, mimi nimeona Yesu Kristo namna hii. Kwa msalaba. Opa. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Every Thursday at 8 p.m. for a moment to grow your faith some more.
Je, ushawahi kuweka jambo kwenye mizani? Ushawahi kupata uzito wake? Haya basi, usitapetape zaidi. Naomba unigande, maana mizani ipo hapa kwa ajili yako.
Vyakula na mbegu za kitamaduni,
na kutuliza fikra na kukuwezesha kupima masuala ibuka katika jamii. Tena kwa busara. Tukutane mizani kila Ijumaa saa 1 machweo kwenye runinga ya Hope TV.
Kenya is experiencing drought that has devastated many communities, especially pastoralist communities, leaving many families in abject poverty.
Sisi hakuna uwezo yoyote, ni kukaa tu kutegemea hii, hakuna kazi. Ni ndio unategemea.
Livestock and livestock products, which are the mainstay of these communities, have been wiped out. The National Drought Management Authority indicates that 2.6 million livestock deaths have been reported in the country as a result of the ongoing drought.
Definitely, now according to the prospects, then it's not really promising, and therefore we just have to plan to feed our people.
Join Dolly Murigi this Friday on The Biting Drought at 7 and 9 p.m. only on Hope TV. Look and live.
Viewer, welcome back. This is Spotlight here on Hope TV, where you look and live, and we are talking about the state of the nation, and specifically about how we can get solutions to what's going on, and I mean some of the other places that we can be able to work on and bring great results to this country. And it's coming out that a values revolution, a Chapter 6 movement would be quite something to imagine for this country. Again, we invite you, being part of this conversation, 0708 222 323. We're talking to Rafael Obonyo, a public policy specialist, and quite some insightful conversation there. I want you to just imagine right now, because I think a values movement is far away from the minds of the politicians right now. I think it's more thoughts of power, thoughts of, just maybe some being stubborn and holding on to particular, just holding hard stances. That's what's going on right now. It's an ego season right now,
Largely, yes.
But the point we're talking about is that there is another angle to this whole national situation, and we're talking about that a Chapter 6 movement, a values revolution would bring a significant impact to this country. I want you to imagine with us and the viewers here, how would that look like? Where would it start? Who would be the actors? And just imagining how that would be like.
I think first is just to emphasize the importance of this, the values revolution or the Chapter 6 movement, as we call it. It will start with the people themselves. And that means that people will not see themselves as mere followers. We must also see ourselves as leaders with power, because we are powerful. We are not inadequate simply because we are mere voters or electorates. We are very, very powerful. But many a times we imagine that change can only come through political leaders. So we will start seeing ourselves as those leaders. So the people themselves. Second, it won't be about power, acquisition of power. For the sake of it, it will be, we want power, which we always delegate to these leaders. We are saying we are taking it back because we want to make sure that we set the fundamentals right in terms of talking about values as the basis for leadership, not materialism, not how many people you can mobilize or gather, not the people you are representing at the table, but it is about a belief in these values, integrity, So that will be very, very important. And the actors would be people and the various formations, church over the years, and not just in Kenya, beyond our borders, all over the world, churches have played fundamental roles in terms of social change. And so churches, faith-based institutions, and civil society organizations, people who do not necessarily want power for the sake of it, people who want power for transformation of the society, those would be the players. The good thing with that is that it'll more or less isolate politicians. Or even if not to isolate them, lock them in some room. Because I am sure when you're talking about Chapter 6 movement or revolution on values, politicians from across the divide will be hesitant to support that. And that means they'll be united against it. And that means there'll be the people that we will be sort of fighting against or seeking to wrestle because they do not believe in these values. Because for them, acquisition of power is to give them access to, you know, more resources, maybe more power, control. But you see, mwananchi would want power for the sake of service, for the sake of better livelihoods and all that. It's not necessarily true that politicians, and most of them, want power to serve the people. And that's why you see a majority of them, after being elected, they will disappear and only show up weeks closer to election. Because for them, power is about, there's something else they want to do. It's like someone who's taken a loan. There's something he wants to do with that money, you know. It's not taking a loan to distribute to people. So I think they look at it that way.
Okay. You know, and I know that you're very passionate about young people. And if there are people who have been tutored or mentored, that corruption is part of our culture, it's young people. You find that, you know, it's very rare you find like upright young people in the present generation because they've grown up in a culture where we bend the rules, where we cut deals, where we bribe our way through things. Now, how do we sanitize this generation so that they become part of this movement, this part of, you know, values champions?
I think it's actually timely because you just need to go back to our 2022 elections. And you remember there were reports from IBC that over 8 million people didn't turn up to vote. But other than that, when the mass voter registration was declared, they were anticipating that they will have like 9 million new voters, largely young people, to come forward and register to exercise their civic duty, which is to vote. They only got about 2 million. That means over 7 million didn't show up. That tells us something, that this generation has learned that you know, these things are not working for us, for our society. You know, elections has become an opportunity for leaders to ride to power. And so why should we sanitize that? And so it's a generation that is actually fed up. And every generation, you know, gets fed up over things that are not working for the previous generations and for them. And it means that these young people feel like we need to find a different ways of tackling this issue. And so they are ripe for that. They are ripe for Chapter 6 movement. They are ripe for that revolution for values, because they are saying, why should I vote for someone to just go in there and take in more resources that are meant for us? I'm not going to wake up very early in the morning to go vote for them like our parents did. So it means that they're looking for another alternative. And while it can be on both ends, it can be an alternative that is rebellious in terms of, you know, saying we won't vote, we will look for other ways of tackling this, and it can be violent. But we must channel that energy and that anger to this other direction of saying, look, we can build a movement here to rebuild our society and our country. And that movement is about values. Because youth suffer the most when they are utilized or used as voting machines. It is youth who suffer the challenge and the problem of unemployment, bad services in terms of access to education. And so it is them that we need to mobilize to be part of this Chapter 6.
When you say that it's a ripe moment, especially for the young people, and also that they don't have to stay away this is the opportunity now to demand
Yes.
power with character, or character
Yeah.
from power.
Yeah.
It's such an active place that they can be active in it. They don't have to stay away.
Certainly.
I mean, they can now be here on the front line, demanding for the sake of today and for the sake of tomorrow.
True.
That we will not hand over this kind of, lack of integrity to the future generations.
True.
We want to hand to the future generation character, not just power. And I think that's a really potent place for young people to get involved in. And I mean, you mentioned employment also. And it's a perpetual challenge, livelihood and young people. And every administration has a promise to young people. And they have sometimes they end up being mocked. Sometimes they end up, starting some programs that don't really quite bear the right, fruit as they are lesser than they are publicized. The effect is lesser than the publicity.
Yeah.
But technically speaking, would you say that the education for employment model has collapsed?
Certainly, and that's why as a country, I think there have been several attempts to try and reform and transform our education system because it's been a system that only churns out graduate, but these graduates are not getting, first of all, there are scarce opportunities in the labor market, but two, the skills required in the labor market are not necessarily the skills that are being provided within our education system. So that mismatch of skills and education or skills required in the labor market is a big challenge. In fact, there is a study that was done and it found that 50% of people who graduate from our university don't get jobs, at least not jobs that they studied for. While on the other end, the private sector keeps saying that, look, there are jobs. What we don't have are people with the right skills to take up these jobs. And so we need to think deeply about how do we reconfigure our education system to be able to sort of align itself to the requirements of the labor market. There have been attempts, like I've said, but sometimes you find that these attempts are also clouded by other short-term gains and goals by individuals, so that change of curriculum sometimes can just be for someone to supply new textbooks or get a new procurement or tender or something like that. So we need to look beyond that and ask, because if we don't get education right, we will never get anything right in this country. And we will continue churning out, for example, graduates and saying, look, we are an educated nation, but then we are educated but jobless. That's a danger because youth unemployment poses a challenge to, our political stability. You can do everything, but for as long as youth are unemployed, you will always find these young people are the ones who are being mobilized to cause chaos or being given tokens or handouts to vote in leaders who perhaps sometimes do not have integrity at all levels. Youth unemployment is a big threat to our economic development. There's no way you can develop when you have a large population in the country who are jobless. So that's a threat. And it's also a threat to social cohesion. We see youth are the ones who are always at the forefront when it comes to political violence and all manner of violence in this country. So we need to address that. And we need to, one of the ways of addressing youth unemployment is to go back to the fundamentals. And that is our education system. Yeah, it hasn't been able to provide us with the kind of sort of skills that youth require to be able to be absorbed in the labor market.
Yeah, and I was reading someplace that there will come a time when what will be a degree will not be so important. What will be important are particular skills particular capacities. And I mean, just looking at the future, right? And that kind of, and we read a few stories of course, they are scattered stories of young people. Like I was reading one again of a young man who was called for a program that he had not chosen at the university. And he went to the university gate one day when he was supposed to enroll. And he stayed at the gate, looked into the institution and asked himself, do I want to stay here for 4 years studying something I did not want to study? And he didn't enroll for it. Well, he's a successful entrepreneur right now. But what we're looking for is also the thinking of the young people. How can the thinking of a young person get to create opportunities beyond standard employment?
I mean, we are reminded every day and that jobs for the future are not about you being employed. It's about you thinking as an employer, and that basically means utilizing the skills that you have. And so there's need for change of mindset also. So we don't see ourselves graduating and start sending around our CVs. That is not what is required. It's now required, one, by default, but two, just the way the world is today. There are fewer resources in the formal sector, for example. You need to think more of how you can create something for your own and bring other people on board. So change of mindset is extremely important. But the other things is for people to start, young people to acquire these skills that are needed, We've been told things about being plumbers, things about being entrepreneurs, things about thinking outside the box, thinking about being a solution provider, thinking about being more proactive, that in the future there won't be someone instructing you on what to do. There's a problem and you have to think of how to resolve it. So change of mindset and education should help us with the skills, and we should take up these skills and also move out of this comfort that, the white collar jobs and start thinking of, how can I acquire skills that can help me come up with something of my own. I've just been reading a book and this is called Peter. And Peter was the founder of PayPal. And he says that the way to create opportunities for ourselves and for other people and generations is not just to copy-paste what has been done. And that basically means that you acquire skills that can help you to do something revolutionary, something different. Not just to be employed and be told, this is your job description. The future is such that there is no job description. It is you to come up with that job description. So we need to think that way.
When you're at it, you're making us think about young politicians or youthful politicians. And you're talking about a generation that needs to think different, right? And we have increasingly younger politicians in number, more younger politicians or youth politicians joining parliament and, leading private institutions and all that. But let's think about how these young, youthful leaders are introducing visibly new thought in terms of, say, our politics. Allow me to say somebody like Johnson Sakaja, who is a youthful leader. And now and again, you do find him, speaking in a way that
political language.
He's departing from the norm, but he's brought back. He has to be tamed back to, and it's kind of, and it's an open public conversation. But what extent should these political leaders, youthful ones, break away from traditional narrative?
First, I identify with your thought, and it's the reality across the world. Now we've seen it in Africa. Kenya is even a perfect example. Leaders are becoming younger and younger. Leadership is no longer about experience. It's also about fresh ideas and freshness. People are willing to give young people an opportunity to lead, to serve in different capacity. But first, I think for me, the good story should not end at the point of we have elected a young leader. Youth leadership must not just be about age. It must also be about what we were discussing, about values. It must be about vision, you know. If you're a young leader and all you do is to continue perpetuating the same old, then there's no difference between you and those old leaders. So we must develop a different value system. We must pump in different values, fresh ideas as young leaders. So that is always my caveat, that we should not just celebrate youth leadership in terms of age. We must also ask ourselves, what is it that is different that we are going to bring in? And that has to be about values, which is what is scarce. It has to be about vision, which is one of the deficits, I mean the main deficit, and of course about fresh ideas. The second thing is that this won't just happen, and it won't happen with ease. Thabo Mbeki was once addressing young people, I think actually in this country at a UN forum, and he said, look, if young people want to build a different society and to lead, they have to rebel against the bad habits of the old generation. Remember, the old generation is really comfortable with their bad habits. You know, corruption has worked for them. Tribalism, negative ethnicity has worked for them. Political posturing, you know, like we've seen over the years, has worked for them. And they won't allow you to come up with anything different because they're not willing to relearn that. So we must rebel against them. And sometimes it means that we will pay the price. For example, if Sakaja, who is a youthful leader and a good an example, if he wants to make any fundamental transformation, he can't just read from the script of the adult generation and other leaders who've come before him and who are perhaps even ahead of him. He has to sometimes say, look, I'm going to pay the price. So you have to rebel against the bad habits of the old generation.
All right.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. This is a really, really solutionist conversation, taking us to, you know, good new frontiers of imagining this country. And when you think about these frontiers, new places like the Chapter 6 revolution, like rebelling against bad habits of the previous generations, you actually begin to feel hope. It's just like we are caught up in an old place where we really must be bolted out by freshness.
Yeah, true.
And I want to thank you so much, Rafael, for such an insightful conversation. And our viewers, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. And you'll be back.
Thank you so very much, and thanks for the wonderful conversation too. I thoroughly enjoyed.
All right. As we think about the state of the nation, so many things coming out from this conversation. But I mean, just the way we've wrapped it. I mean, you know, thankful to Rafael Obonyo's wisdom. It is important for us to rise against vice. This has been Spotlight. Thank you for watching.